We are live with the Short-Term Rental Pros podcast. And today I am with the king of short-term rental Twitter himself, Mr. Jones, Taylor Jones. How are you doing, man? And tell us, how'd you become the king of short-term rental Twitter?
Well, thank you for the kind intro. I actually got started a couple of years ago posting about me and my wife's personal journey in short-term rentals. We had a couple cabins up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And to me, I just wanted to share the experience. I started posting every day, talking about our wins, our losses, our struggles. And when you show up every day, some magic happens. And all of a sudden, the following started growing. It continued to build. And I just woke up and, had tens of thousands of followers. And it's become something I would have never expected 2 years ago.
Yeah. And you also, your day job is you help run a short-term rental investment fund. So yeah, Techvestor, tell us about that. And I want to get it. So I'm actually talking to Sabrina later today, who is one of Taylor's colleagues at Techvestor, as well as Seif, another one, John Bianchi, who I've had on multiple times, works at Techvestor. So this is a Short-Term Rental Pro podcast. The fact that I'm having 4 people in one company on really shows just how good they are at this game. But what is Techvestor? What do you do for them? And what's your experiences the last few been growing such an insanely massive portfolio?
Yeah, so I run the acquisitions team. And so what we're doing is we're constantly looking at properties to acquire. We're looking at the data, we're underwriting, we're sourcing constantly, trying to find what's the best product to buy in our core markets.
First of all, what is Techvestor? Just at a high level for those who don't know.
Yeah, so we're a short-term rental investment fund. We allow people to passively invest with us. We will pool that capital together. We'll buy properties, renovate them, design them, furnish them, operate them, and then split the cash flows with those investors. So it's a great way to get passive income. You get exposure to the asset class. So if you're looking to diversify your portfolio, but you don't want to do any of the freaking work that comes with operating short-term rental, our team does all the work. We're going to pool that capital together. We're going to buy the properties, renovate them, design them, furnish them, operate them, and ultimately split the cash flows with the investors. From an investor standpoint, you get exposure to a diversified portfolio and you don't have to do any of the work, all the while sitting back and collecting a quarterly dividend check. So it makes it a real passive experience while giving you exposure to a diversified portfolio of short-term rentals.
And how many have you got? Well, first of all, when did Techvestor get started, and how many properties have you acquired since then?
Yeah, we started 2 years ago. We've acquired over 130 in the last 2 years and are continuing to scale, over the next 5 to 10 years. So we'll continue to build our portfolio, continue to have more investors come with us on this journey. And then ultimately there will be some form of a liquidation event, whether that be via sale or via refinance. That's what we're building towards.
And your role within Techvestor is, you said, the head of acquisitions?
That is correct.
So that means, you're the one calling agents, negotiating deals. Is that kind of what that entails?
Yeah, no, certainly. It's looking at all across our core markets that we want to be in. So, right now we're deep studying about 30. We're currently in 9. And, it's looking at the inventory that comes online in those available markets, looking at what's the best possible, asset to buy, talking to brokers, looking at the underwriting, assessing the data comps, making sure it fits our buy box. Is the return profile something we would accept, with us and our investors? And then ultimately, if that's the case, we're going to place an offer and buy that property.
Got it. Okay. So you're checking the boxes, essentially. You've got your criteria. And I'm just going to be honest, at this point, when I am setting up, so I'm currently setting up a property. And I've even posted this on my Instagram, on my story, but I look at y'all's properties for inspiration at this point. And I think there was a period where John was like, oh, I looked at your properties for inspiration and I felt good about myself. But now I feel, just looking at I'm just so insecure at all my properties at this point. The ones I set up 2-3 years ago, I'm like, damn, if I knew what I knew now, or if I just had your guys' properties in mind when I was setting those up, they would look very different. They're very, very impressive. And I think I saw someone's tweet. I thought it was pretty funny when interest rates were at their highest. I think someone tweeted at you, hey, is there a correlation between interest rates and the number of amenities you have at your property? Because you just, every square inch of the properties you guys set up now are decked out with some sort of something with listing appeal. So I guess I know I'm not asking a specific question, but yeah, how do you, I mean, you guys are buying at a time when people are like scared, they're scared to buy. Interest rates are high, short-term rentals are dead. How do you guys continually acquire and win in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we're seeing is the markets we're going into, the strategy that we're executing is we're out designing and out amenitizing the, Uncle Bob common investor. We don't play in the luxury space. It's not something we want to compete in. It would be a completely different thesis. For us, we want to go compete against middle of the road Uncle Bob. And here's the thing, when those people are designing or setting up their short-term rental, they're setting it up for themselves, which is a huge flaw. Us, we're not staying in our properties ever. It's specifically designed for our guest avatar. So if we're in an area that's promoting to families, we're all in on amenitizing for families. If it's a group of women for a bachelorette outing, we're all in on setting it up for women. If it's a dude's outing, same thing. We're going to be setting it up exactly for there. When we nail that guest avatar from a setup, from a design, from an amenity standpoint, that's what people want to book. They don't want to book, oh, my personal preference was white subway tile. It's my Airbnb. I come and use this once a year. Well, they set it up for themselves, not exactly for the guest avatar. It also goes to show, too, when you talk about amenities, we're willing to spend that money up front because we know there's an ROI. The most common owner is not going to necessarily spend that money. If we see the value in putting in a pickleball court in the backyard, we're going to put a pickleball court in. If we think we can convert the garage into a golf simulator, which we have done, we're going to do it. If we're going to add miniature golf or a huge playground set or cornhole, bocce ball, soccer, whatever it might be, we're going to spend that money because we know the ROI is there. And so ultimately, when we're competing against middle of the road investors who are setting this up for themselves as a second home, we're constantly winning. We're constantly driving more revenue and ultimately driving more cash flow for us and our investors.
Yeah, and I actually I was doing a live training the other day, and I was going. I'm fully transparent. I operate my portfolio. I know, or we touched on a lot of folk who post content out there aren't really in the weeds or don't actually operate their portfolios anymore. They kind of just talk about it or talk about the lifestyle aspect of things. Where I'm very much in the weeds and trying to improve every day and make my operations from a management perspective better, but also improve the setup. And I was live and I was talking about how in South Florida, the Airbnb bust, whatever, I was giving the full transparent numbers on like my year over year data at different properties. And like most of my portfolio is like, maybe if we're down, we might be down like a little bit, or there's some properties where I, really improved them last year, maybe added a hot tub, maybe like kind of redesigned it a little bit and they're actually doing better. But the one area where like my properties are like noticeably down is like probably the only area like where I kind of compete with you in that like South Florida area, which I actually initially was talking to Seif about like that area. And I think I introduced him to like a broker or something, and he told me he started making offers. So I think I may have like self-sabotaged myself there. But I was going through and I was like, yeah, just the properties in this area, like they've been leveled up. The mini putt-putt wasn't here before. And then I clicked on one. I was like, this one, for example, and I saw Sabrina's face on it. I was like, damn it.
Yeah, it's something that's happened. And, for us, when we go into a lot of these non-high design, non-amenitized markets and bring the level that we bring, you instantly scale up what is considered table stakes to compete. That's why we don't love markets that are already like highly cutthroat, the Joshua Trees, the Disneys. It's really hard to differentiate and win. Now, yes, we're in Scottsdale, which you could also argue is in that same breath of high design, high competition, but we found a niche with those big resort style backyards to win. It gives us that opportunity. So for us, we just love going to areas where the level of competition isn't at that peak. And we're going to come in and operate there and force everybody else to kind of step their game up to that level.
Yeah. And in order for you guys to go somewhere, you need to be able to do enough properties. So I'm not going to lie, I'm not expanding in that area anymore. I'm not going to say because you are, but there's just like the level it's been taken to another level. Plus home prices have boomed in South Florida. And honestly, the whole insurance situation, I don't know about, I think you live in Florida.
Oh yeah,
Or do you live in Florida?
I do. I do.
Bro, we've had 2 consecutive years of insurance premium increases, and I can complain about Florida all day. Uh, but that being said, like I feel solace being in places where I know there's just not enough volume for you guys to come where it makes sense. Because you do need to, like, for you guys to operate in a place, like you're not just looking to do 1, 2, 3 properties. Like you need to be able to do 20, 30, 50 for it to make sense. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. People reach out and they're like, man, like, I'm scared. If you guys are passing on the deal, then I shouldn't buy it. And I'm like, no, that's not necessarily the right choice because, yeah, to your point, if we can't get at least 10, 12, 15 in a short amount of time, it doesn't make sense. And we've passed on markets where there is, teen level returns, very solid cash on cash opportunities, but we can't get density. We could buy 1, 2, 3, and then we'd be stuck. And for us, at the scale that we operate, it just makes sense to go after density. There's way more levers we can pull from a operation standpoint, from a controlling expenses standpoint, from a driving revenue standpoint, vendor standpoint, any of these different opportunities. Scale matters for us. And so, yeah, we are passing on a lot of markets that a common investor could go rip 1, go rip 2, and still get a great return that we're just never going to go into because the inventory is not there, the density isn't there, whatever those factors might be.
So you guys listening, you're safe. You're safe from Taylor coming into your neighborhood and raising the level of competition, to a place that you don't want it to be. You don't have to add the pickleball court and the and the mini putt putt. But yeah, I like people always I feel like talk to me about, oh, what happens when like the institutions come in, like what happens when like the Blackstones come in and the BlackRocks come in the short-term rental, like aren't you screwed? Well, and I say honestly, the suits don't win at this game. And there's a variety of reasons. Actually, there was an article about, I think it was like TPG, who went into South Florida and started buying up homes. And then I think it was an article talking about how they were going in. I think it was like 5 months after the fact, like they had posted, it was a reputable source. I think it was like the Wall Street Journal or something. But then the next day it was another article about how they were leaving. So like, and what I say is like, you guys, you didn't come from like the suit background, because like someone who's like a major capital allocator who's done, bought hundreds of millions of dollars of bonds, buying the process of buying like $100-200 million of bonds is like not a very intensive process. Like, sure, you might have like an analyst, an associate, an MD who work on it and underwrite it, but that's really it. And then you find a broker and you sign a paper, click a couple buttons. To set up 100, I mean, how if you were just to like give me a ballpark on like the total value of the houses in your portfolio at this point, what would it be?
I mean, it's going to be north of 100 million, and you hit the nail in the coffin there with
it's a grind.
The institutions. Yeah, it's literally brick by brick. It is one single family home at a time, and we've talked to a lot of those groups that you've mentioned, as well as a couple others, that are in that same breath, and they all have an interest in this space. But their preference would be to buy over build. And a lot of it is you can't build it quick enough. When you're talking about allocating 250 to 500 million, which is like really the minimum they're going to get out of bed, you couldn't deploy that quick enough. So the opportunity we have as we build is ultimately once it gets in that size range for an exit, they're far more interested in just buying a stabilized portfolio. So, as far as institutions entering this asset class, you could argue they're in Joshua Tree on the development side. You can argue they're in Disney on the development side. Again, a slow, methodical process and very niche specific. But as far as going in and buying in, Asheville or Blue Ridge or the Smokies or, Austin, Texas or anything like that, like it hasn't been proven. And from the conversations we've had, we just don't see it. It's just not something that they would allocate the capital towards. But from a buy it standpoint, that's what gets them, most excited.
Got it. Okay. So for the exit opportunity, having the size, the bigger you guys get, the better options there are from an exit perspective. But all right, let's go away from the private equity, like large asset manager and kind of think about like a normal investor. I mean, I'll even think about like myself. Like I've learned like from you guys and what you guys do. I mean, you guys are very data driven. Every amenity you add to the properties, like there's a reason behind it. And I think like, frankly, I haven't really seen anybody else who does as many amenities to properties. So I guess I want to break into like, how should somebody think about amenities setting up their house and like the ROI? And also like, are there specific amenities that pretty much work everywhere? Like someone has a property, a single family home in like, let's just say like a semi-urban environment, that, you know, it's a catch-all amenity that just going to work.
Yeah. So, as far as catch-all amenity, I would say fire pits. No doubt. Everybody likes sitting around the fire, even if you're in Florida where it is hot, where
I
I
actually
live.
don't have fire pits in my 2 Florida properties. I don't want to.
I will tell you, we put them in at
away from
every
those.
single property, regardless of location. And there's just an ROI there. It's a gathering space. Sales is the transfer of emotion. And what you're doing is you're convincing somebody to, put their vacation dollars to use at your property. And really, you're just trying to transfer that emotion. So they see the photo of 8 Adirondack chairs around the fire pit, and they can imagine their family sitting there, having s'mores, talking, drinking wine, whatever it might be. That's what gets them to book. And, as far as what amenities to add, a simple process that I tell people, even at a, one-off investor standpoint, go to the target market that you're considering, pull up every listing on the first 2 pages of Airbnb. So do a flexible search for, 6 months out on like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So high availability. Most people probably don't have that random Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday booked. Open up every single listing and start writing down an amenities list. So listing number 1 that showed up first, it has hot tub, fire pit, game room. Listing number 2 has hot tub, game room. It's lakefront, it's a mountain view, it's walking distance to the main strip of bars, whatever it is. Build a commonalities list. And then once you get those first 2 pages, you're going to have right around 30 total listings, 30 total amenities list. Figure out what the commonalities start to look like. If 28 out of 30 have a hot tub, guess what minimum table stakes are? You need a hot tub. If only 2 out of 30 have a hot tub, that might be an opportunity for you to differentiate, because it's like, hey, there's not a lot of people that have this. And so those are things I would look at as what's the bare minimum? And you're going to find that out based on your competition, because if they're on the first 2 pages, they're most likely top performers for that area. So once you build that commonalities list, you'll get a good idea of what's minimum table stakes that you must have. And then start thinking of 1 or 2 things you can add to differentiate that those common ones don't have. That would be the best place to start if I was, just as a one-off investor wanting to compete and add really great amenities to my property to win in my local market.
Got it. So for instance, the new property I'm doing, it's not a very competitive local market. I mean, at this point, I have a couple of properties there, so I'm making it, kind of like, I don't want to say self-cannibalizing, but making it a more competitive market. But what I'm doing is I'm looking at just listings that I like in different markets and trying to take inspiration, and your guys are definitely some of them, inspiration from, let's say, the Scottsdale, Arizona, pull from there and then apply it at this market. Is that something that's kind of like for markets that don't have as many, I call it like pros, the ones who don't have these pro properties, to pull from different areas where it is more competitive?
No, studying similar markets is a great idea. Here's a real example. So when we were investing in Blue Ridge, Georgia, we started looking at the Smokies, and movie theaters were in almost every other cabin. Like 50% of cabins had a movie theater in the Smokies. We looked at Blue Ridge and it was less than 1%. And we're like, man, it's a popular cabin market. It's driving distance to a major metro, right outside of Atlanta. Why is there no movie theaters? So we started putting movie theaters in all of our cabins, and like, holy crap, it differentiated. And that was an idea that we took from another existing market, which is just such an easy way to win. So if you're in an urban market, go look at another similar urban market, find the top performers, find inspiration, go for it. If you're in a, lake destination, look at another lake popular, place. If you're in a cabin market, if you're in a beach market, because what works in the Smokies kind of works in other markets that are cabin related. And so we kind of have seen more and more people start, catching on. And now movie theaters are more and more common in Blue Ridge. And so it's a way to get ahead of everybody by just seeing what other markets are working and then implementing that and being an early adopter to it for your local place.
Yeah. So the property, so on Wednesday, I'm flying down. I haven't actually been to the property since we closed on it. We are adding a movie theater. It is going to be the only movie theater. I don't think that there is another one in the market. Do you think a movie theater is one of those things that just like pretty universally works? Let's just say it's a city environment, but the city, it's a lot of people visiting their families who moved out of the city, or a lot of like soccer tournaments, like random sporting events. Would you say that, do you think a movie theater is kind of like a catch-all amenity?
Yeah, I would say if you have a 3+ bedroom and you're going to sleep 8 to 16, plus guests, there's always going to need to be a space for kids that's separate from the adults. If the adults are sitting around the living room couch, sipping cocktails, having fun, you don't want that to be the only sitting space, because then they can't get away from the kids. They can't have that, alone time. And so the kids can go into the movie theater and watch Disney Plus, Netflix, YouTube, whatever. So yeah, it's such a universal, amenity. Am I putting it in a 1 or 2 bedroom that sleeps 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people? Probably not. There, I think the ROI might not yield you what you want, but the cost to put one in, when you have an 8, 10, 12, 14 plus person, occupancy, is well worth it.
So you would say game rooms and movie theaters, pretty universal as long as it's more than 3 bedrooms. If you had like a 5-bedroom home, and let's say you have a 5-bedroom home and a garage, you're turning that garage into a game room and then one of the rooms into a movie theater, or like high level, how would you go about thinking, what should I do with this space?
I still think the game room over movie theater, if you had a 1-to-1, like, hey, I can only add one of these. I would never take away a bedroom, because heads in beds is still going to always be a winning strategy. But I would go over a game room. It's going to occupy people longer. It's going to be more, universal. At the end of the day, with the movie theater, the group can only watch one movie. It's not like, there's 5 different movies for the 5 different kids. But if in the game room you have pool table, and then you got shuffleboard, and then you got arcades over here, and then you got board games, everybody can kind of do something different, or 4 different people can get in on the doubles, billiards game. So it's always going to give you a better, interactive experience and hospitality with the game room. But if you have the space for both, I would add both.
Got it. Okay. So game room, we got the garage, guys. We're converting the garage to the game room, and then we're being creative with the movie theater. So this is universal, or relatively universal. Don't it's like, how it's like, you don't want to give accounting advice before or you have to say non-accountant. This is totally dependent on your specific property situation. However, this is probably some of the better advice that you'll be hearing relative to what there is out there. So yeah, what are some pro tips you have in 2024 to succeed? Maybe it's a property you already own and you're trying to maximize it. Maybe you're looking to just get into the game. Like what are things that like people should be thoughtful of in order to, be able to have success?
We really look at every square foot of the property inside and out. How can this generate additional revenue for me? And when you really think about it, it's leveraging those spaces. So if you have a family room and a living room, the most common area I see is you put a sectional in the living room and a TV, and you put a sectional in the family room and a TV. And the error there is you should convert the family room into a pool table, hangout, game room space. So you create that separation. When you come into your backyard, what I see is a lot of open space. And that's typically not the way you want to do it. You want to fill the space, because when people are looking at photos and they see so many different things that could occupy their family, their group of friends, their outing, they're going to pay a higher premium for it. So when you have, blank yard space, you want to fill it with things like fire pits, hot tubs, cornhole, mini putt, playgrounds, anything that can kind of fill the space. And there's a lot of like really great things that aren't that over the top. Nothing I mentioned on there is going to cost you, even depending on the size of the miniature golf, like you can get that done for as low as $4,000. And obviously that can run all the way up to 10 if you're doing decked out, but playgrounds under $2,000, fire pits, depending on the scale, how much stone, that could be anywhere from 1 to 5,000, depending on, again, how decked out you go. A little cornhole area, we're talking a couple $100. You could do giant chess, $400 to $600, depending on the size and the quality. So none of these are going to be like breaking the bank. They're all going to be strong ROI perspectives. But when I see blank space just sitting there, that's not generating any revenue. And that's a huge miss that a lot of people don't capitalize on when they could have filled it with a revenue generating amenity. So leverage those spaces, whether it's in the inside or the outside. We touched on the garage. We touched on that secondary living room. Those are things you want to look at, is what space can be converted or added to make more money.
I'm actually doing my first play structure. That is, have not done that one before. I guess any tips or advice on the play structure? Like you said, it's I think it's like $2,000 or something. how do we optimize that for success?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, anybody with kids, they've been around to several different playgrounds. So when they come to yours, does mom and dad look at me like, oh, this thing's pretty dinky, and my kid's not gonna like this, or is this of really good quality? So that's one of those that you probably don't get the cheapest one, but you get one of those mid level, which you kind of nailed the price. That's where you're going to be in that couple $1,000 range. It's provided a great space for kids. It has a ton of options. You can get a basic.
I may have cheaped out. I might have to do a return.
Yeah. You don't want the one that just has a slide and 2 swings and that's it. We like adding the ones that have like the ball, the monkey bars and the little, climbing area and a net space and 2 slides, like those extra little things. It's going to keep the kids occupied longer, which means the parents get a more relaxing experience, which means they're more likely to write you a 5-star review, which means they're more likely to come back if they ever visit the area. And you just keep that flywheel going with your business. Because you did it right and you didn't go with the cheap route that created the bad experience and then the bad review and then they don't come back.
Got it. Okay. So I cheaped out on my play structure. I should have had this call before I bought, or this podcast before I bought. Damn. All right. Well, now I feel crappy. I guess what else? What else should I feel bad? Well, one thing I think you guys do a really good job, and I think you touched on this, is like separating the spaces. Like in your guys' backyards, you do a really good job of essentially using I would say like using string lights and gravel to make it feel like everything, like it's just not a big grass backyard with everything just like sprawled out, next to each other. It's this space over here is encircled by string lights. This fire pit is encircled by string lights. This cornhole area is like in a little string light square. Like you guys really are artists with string lights in order to create the different areas. Is there some sort of science or thought behind? Am I onto something there? Is that
you are definitely on there. It's an intentional use of space. You can tell when you show up to a property, even as a guest. Like if I'm staying as a personal Airbnb guest at somebody's property, if they just threw the amenities in the yard on the grass, you can tell. But if it's intentional with walkways, gravel, or how we'll do, like we'll enclose that area. So the cornhole area, it's not just 2 cornhole boards in the yard, but they're kind of like enclosed with some string lights or some structures or some posts, or, whether it's the chess or the fire pit area. It's all intentional and it creates that experience. It gives it a higher, luxury feel so that you can charge a higher ADR. So you're absolutely right. As far as bang for the buck, and you said string lights multiple times, so we might as well get into it. I can't think of something more efficient use of my dollar than string lights. Depending on where you're at least locally here, they're typically about $1 a foot. So a 25-foot strand is typically running about $25. I mean, obviously, hey, you can get the crazier light bulb ones, the cheaper ones. But if you're in that $25 to $50 range for a 25-foot area, which is just absolutely massive, I mean, it would be hard pressed to spend over $300 in string lights to fill your entire yard. To me, it's the best thing when you take those nighttime photos, those sunset photos, it sets the mood. To me, it's the lowest hanging fruit you could do for your property is add string lights. And, a common thing in mountain markets is you put them along the railing. So if you have a 2-tier deck, the mistake I see is people cheap out. They just run string lights on the bottom deck or the top. Put them on both. It's going to look way better in your photos. Not everybody's going to only be on the top deck or only on the bottom deck. Put them across all the railings, all the opportunities. Those are the things that are going to take your property and push it over the edge that the common investor just isn't doing today.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things. So this like off season, I'm trying to refresh some of our properties. What I'm doing is I bought 4 hot tubs. I'm pretty much adding a hot tub to each lake house that doesn't already have one. I feel like hot tubs used to be like I think there's like checklist amenities, like things that you need, and then there's like over the top amenities, like things that nobody in your market has that they're going to pick you over everybody else because you offer this one thing. I feel like in the off season, in like, I don't know, this is my take, so if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it, but like if you're not an extremely urban market, your winter is going to be screwed unless you have a hot tub pretty much at this point.
Yeah, with the cold weather, the thought is, how do you extend the season? And, you can extend it by providing opportunities where they can still enjoy themselves in a different way. So obviously, if it's cold outside, you can enjoy yourself with the hot tub. If you have an indoor pool or an indoor gathering space, all those things matter, especially when the weather does get colder, for you to extend the season so that you can drive more revenue for your property than your competition.
Got it. So, and hot tub's one of those things, but what I'm also doing is adding string lights to pretty much every property. I usually used to buy like the 50 feet of string lights and maybe do it over the fire pit or kind of like do it in one place. But no, that's not enough. We gotta pimp out everything with string lights. We need them on the top of the decks. We need them on the bottom of the decks, the walkways, because I have like, even if it's just grass, put it in the grass just to like kind of make it, some like intentionality. But yeah, trying to get my landscaper to get on board with the plan, because I'm not actually doing any of this, frankly. I'm remote, but I got to convince people, hey, we're putting up posts everywhere and doing a bunch of string lights. And not gonna lie, it might be a little bit difficult to really rally behind that if you don't see the why. But also like just gravel. Also gravel is just areas where the grass isn't growing or the grass kind of just looks crappy. Just gravel it. The gravel is clean. You don't really have to do much upkeep on it. So I'm assuming that's the reason you guys do gravel a lot too, is then you don't have to pay a lawnmower to go back there. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Yeah. You save an OpEx. So ultimately, it's like, hey, does it look aesthetically good? But then also, does it help you keep your costs in line from an operational standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint? Another thing you could point to is turf. Roughly turf's running about $9 to $11 a foot, all in. That's, labor, installation, et cetera. So, it can be pricier, especially if you have a 20 by 20 space. You're talking 4 Gs. To turf it. But again, it's a low maintenance. Are you going to hold this for 10 years? Do you never want to deal with it? It also will give you a higher end look. Like turf does give you a more classy look than grass. You don't risk it getting brown and getting a bad review. So, we definitely integrate turf. It's not universal. It's not every property, but you can kind of tell when it's a good opportunity to turf this section. And then same thing, you can amenitize that turf area by putting giant chess, cornhole, Connect Four, et cetera. And now you filled that space. You could do a little soccer area, put a soccer net up. People can kick, run, sit. You could put loungers there. There's so much flexibility with turf compared to grass that it's a really good opportunity to leverage. And, to us, in most cases, that $10 a foot, what it averages out to is well worth putting it in your yard space.
Ever look into the permeability requirements?
It's definitely going to vary by location. Obviously, hey, the local rules, local municipalities, is definitely some nuance there. But whenever that opportunity presents itself, we typically find that it is worth it. Yeah,
I just had that issue. I don't want to keep ripping on Florida, but I had that learned about permeability rules and turf and whatnot. I'm like, what is that? What's a permeability rule? Like what? But apparently that's a thing. And turf is not impermeable somehow. Water doesn't get through, I guess. It like stays on top, maybe. I don't know.
There's a lot of porous ones now, so it's pretty shocking it's definitely, the technology's gotten way better from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But it's definitely become a better solution. And I know new construction in like Phoenix, Arizona, you're required to put it in. You can't go grass anymore. So
the rain.
Exactly. There. Oh yeah. And it's, the upkeep, the watering, et cetera. So that's all new construction product. I think as of 22 or 23 in Phoenix, Scottsdale has to be turfed or gravel. It's your only choice.
Got it, guys. So we're looking at turf, gravel, all the amenities. If you guys go back through the podcast and just literally write down every single one of these amenities that Taylor spoke of today, the big chess, play structures, send me the list, take notes for me. So then I can then implement these at my properties. What is your biggest, what's your biggest pro tip? I like to ask everybody, what's your biggest pro tip, for short-term rental investors? And actually I want to backtrack a little bit. How do you guys operate 125 properties and like make sure that they're in good shape and that, the swing doesn't have like a piece of metal or, like just that these amenities don't start withering?
It's a lot of SOPs on the back end, a lot of tech. So for us, we're constantly refining these, standard operating procedures. And, that's the cleaning and maintenance team that's going in and logging pictures. So for us, We're getting photos after every turnover, after every walkthrough. If there's a gap, and we're going to have a maintenance tech go in and, tighten all the screws, make sure the light bulbs are working. The outdoor bowling does in fact have 10 pins, because if one's missing, the guest is going to be like, hey, I can't play this amenity correctly. So in order to keep tabs on that, we've standardized it with a lot of tech on the back end and getting photos of every space, every amenity. We're also providing a checklist for those cleaners to make sure, and the maintenance staff, hey, please make sure that there is 22 pieces for the chess. Make sure that there is 10 pins for the bowling. If it's ping pong, you need at least 2 paddles there, so people can play together. The billiards needs 10, 15, it needs to fit the triangle, et cetera. So we haven't been as clean as we are today, and we'll still continue to get better. We are not perfect. And, our checklist gets more in depth. We continue to add new stuff to it. We're continuing to refine our process. But, in order to maintain the quality at scale as we continue to grow, it is a ton of tech, a ton of standard operating procedures to make sure that we're accounting for everything. And then our team is looking at it on the back end. Obviously, we're, fully remote to these properties, but we're able to make sure everything's there. And if something's missing, we have a process in place to get it replenished in a timely manner.
You guys have Walmart.com and Amazon.com Prime. That's get it there to the same day shipping or tomorrow. Okay, so that's interesting. And I think Sabrina's kind of the operations. That's kind of her
absolutely.
neck of the woods.
Yeah, certainly. You'll have a blast if you want to dive into some of the ops world. She can really have a lot of fun there. I tend to stay out of that. Not my cup of tea, but yeah,
I would say your world's more fun. Picking the toys, and that's admittedly the world I enjoy more. And then as the portfolio scales, it becomes, if you manage your own portfolio, it becomes a little bit the operations, having someone local who will like go by and have, because the issue is like, what I've seen is like you can give people the lists and tell them to check stuff, but like if they just, there's going to be things that they just have to use their eyes for, like just look around the place, like what's like notice things like oh, there's a hole in the wall, like
we need to open our eyes so we can see this.
Yeah, exactly. But that's, finding the right team members in different locations is just like so crucial, especially when you don't want to have to like go to each property, once every 2-3 months, which at scale is logistically impossible. So, or just not even what you want to be doing with your time. So, all right. So everyone, you're in for a treat, talking to Sabrina later, but Taylor is the king of Twitter. He shares tons of gems, information every day. How can folk find you if they want to learn from your knowledge and experiences?
Yeah, certainly. Posts a lot of content on Twitter, X, at Mr. Jones STRs. Started growing on LinkedIn as well, just, Taylor Jones. And, who knows, maybe I might come join the short form video, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube world here soon. So it's on the list to try to get more active on those. But for now, it's a lot of content, a lot of copywriting. So, Twitter, X, LinkedIn is really where I'm at.
Got it. And then also, I'm going to backtrack a little bit here because I'm curious. So interest rates are getting higher, but you guys keep buying. Like, do you have like kind of a rough like analysis or estimate on properties to like kind of what's your like quick pencil math on what makes a good short-term rental investment or not?
Yeah, this one's always going to be ever evolving, but we always look at what's the price to rent ratio. So in essence, what's the rental revenue divided by purchase price, and you're going to get a percentage. And depending on where interest rates are at, for us, our qualification is that's going to be anywhere from like 17% all the way up to like, hey, it needs to be north of 20. So on a property that, the purchase price is 500 grand, a 20% price to rent ratio would mean you generate 100 grand in revenue on it. So 100 grand divided by 500 gives you 20%. Because if you backdoor math out all your OpEx, utilities, household supplies, property management, maintenance, upkeep, landscaping, et cetera, is there enough margin left over? Well, I don't have to underwrite a, 12% price to rent ratio, meaning if the property's 500 grand, it's going to grow 60. I don't need to underwrite that, because if I go through and underwrite it, that deal is going to be shit, and for me, that's kind of the tough part is like, hey, we don't, we know where that needs to be. And that's for us what we need to make sure we're hitting. So the envelope math, depending on where interest rates are, high, low, and different, is going to be somewhere between that 17 to 20% price to rent ratio minimum that we're going to need to hit.
And how much let's say a 500K house that's going to pull in 100K of revenue, like how much would you anticipate spending on like amenitizing it?
Yeah, I mean, us going over the top, which is a hedge and a protectant, between all amenities, furniture, decor, stocking the property, we're typically probably coming in, right around that 15 to 20% mark. So, somewhere in that, 75 to 100. But again, that's going to include all the furnishings, all the decor. We do tons of wallpaper, murals, the amenities, the renovations. So that's going to be really our like out the door FF&E is typically somewhere in that 15 to 20% range, but again, we're doing everything necessary to make it a top performer. And that's really what it's going to take from a capital standpoint.
Got it. Okay. So that's 100K, but then that 100K is going to produce, it's going to return on itself fairly quickly. Whereas if you don't spend that money, then the drag on your interest and mortgage and whatnot is high. So it's worth spending up front in order to out return in the long run is kind of the way you guys look at it.
Yeah, it's also going to give you a hedge in a downturn. So, what I would say is like people still travel, maybe the bottom of the barrel. So, people more budget conscious don't, but wealthy people still travel. They might change their habits. They're maybe not flying to, Europe anymore.
Yeah.
So when you're highly amenitized, you still get booked. Now, maybe instead of 500 a night, you're at 400 a night, but guess what? You still got booked. The bottom of the barrel sits vacant. And if you aren't amenitized or designed well, you run that risk in a recession. For us, we're not as worried about a downturn. We know we're still going to continue to get booked. Yes, our insane ADRs might come down to, quote unquote, normal levels. But if it's affecting us, it's going to affect everybody. So for us, we want to weather that downturn. We want to still generate a profit. Yes, it might not be an insane profit, but when things pick up, we'll continue to boost our ADRs and continue to be in a good position to cash flow for us and our investors.
Yeah. Well, Ange, I don't know what how it works with debt financing and stuff, but if we really do hit a big downturn in your ADRs, I'm assuming that would also correspond with lower interest rates to refinance at. So, and then also probably on the back end, a lot of people would leave. A lot of the Uncle Bobs would just exit, and then once you hit the upswing again, you're going to be one of the only ones left sitting there, able to capture again those higher ADRs, and then having refinanced to a lower interest rate in this quote unquote like worst case scenario. So in the worst case scenario, it's not actually all that bad. Okay, cool. So yeah, what is your I know I touched on this before, but last thing I'd like to always ask is what is your biggest pro tip?
Biggest pro tip is professional photography. I think it's the lowest hanging fruit. When we're comping, when we're sourcing, when we're underwriting on a daily basis, I'm typically seeing anywhere from 50 to 100 different listings across the country. And it is absolutely crazy what photography does to a listing. Even if you're not highly designed, even if you're not highly amenitized, professional photography is massive. Critical error people make is I see the listings and I'm like, man, is this home listed for sale? Like, is this on the MLS? Because they got real estate photography. There is a huge difference between short-term rental or Airbnb photography and real estate photography. Has to do with a lot of like how the rooms are captured, the wide lens, the narrow, et cetera. But you can just see this home looks like it's listed for rent and that's or listed for sale. And that's kind of the vibe that a lot of listings give because they hired a real estate photographer who's taking photos as if the home was going to be listed on the MLS. The problem is that doesn't transfer emotion. I want a short-term rental photographer, an Airbnb one, who can get that transfer of emotion. Again, like we talked about, sales is just the transfer of emotion. I want those photos to give that family, that emotional connection to be like, man, I can see ourselves in that garage that was converted to a game room. I could see ourselves in that living room. I could see ourselves enjoying time in the pool or the hot tub. And if you can't convey that emotion, you're not going to get booked. But, photography is such a huge opportunity. And I think a lot of people don't invest in it. I'll tell you, frankly, we get a ton of properties reshot. What ends up happening is even our core photographers sometimes miss in our markets. And so we're having to get a second photographer out there. And then you have to look and be like, okay, who shot the living room better? Photographer A or B? Let's take A's. Who did the kitchen better? Maybe it's B's. And yeah, people might, roll their eyes and be like, oh, well, you're spending $800 instead of $400 on photography. But if I'm going to go drive 8,000 more in revenue because I got way better photos, the cost of photography is negligible. And so for us, investing in that great photography is worth every penny. We would We joked we would pay $2,000 for photography if we guaranteed it would be perfect every time. It's worth that cost that people just don't realize it. So that is my huge pro tip.
Yeah, and photographers who can Photoshop in the fire in the fire pit and can do the little the twilights, get the little create the different motions you talked about of daytime versus nighttime. I actually would love to hear your thoughts. I know we're kind of wrapping up here, but I talked to someone yesterday. So I told you like couple of the properties or some of the properties I set up 2-3 years ago. I just they're pretty blank canvases, white walls, like pretty clean, pretty minimalist, pretty modern, but definitely not like the interiors don't like stand out. Like the exteriors, whether maybe they're lake houses, mountain houses, they have, the views or the water. So like obviously those stand out. But what I'm trying to is have someone go, they're actually from Florida. They potentially would drive up, start in my like Smoky Mountains properties, go towards like my central North Carolina properties and end at like the lake houses and just mural, like essentially just wall, add color to this wall, add color to this wall, paint this wall, mural, and just go one house at a time and like do 3 walls in each house. Do you think that makes sense? Do you think that's worthwhile?
No. So a big proponent of murals and or wallpaper. I think wallpaper is making a massive comeback. We do bright, bold colors, especially in Florida, especially in Arizona. We started even integrating up at the Northeast and, cabin markets as well. White drywalls or people putting a frame up is really a thing of the past. And, you can see it's boring. It needs life. Creative colors, murals, wallpaper, we're all in on. Wallpaper is sneakily expensive, but
and to get someone to do the wallpaper is actually insanely expensive.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Finding the right person who can put it up correctly, make sure it doesn't get, ruined or fall down or have bubbles. It's definitely not easy, but because so few people do it, it's something that we continue to do because we see that there's so much opportunity for it.
I'm actually, one of the reasons I'm going down this weekend to look at this house is because I'm meeting with someone to do the wallpaper. And I was like, if I can actually get a wallpaper person, because like I've tried, like the last house I did, I bought a bunch of, I probably spent $2,000 on wallpaper. And it was like the middle of peak season and tried putting it up on one wall and was like, holy shit, this is not working. All right, we got to get this thing rented. Like, we have big bookings that we're missing. I'm going to go deal with this wallpaper thing later, put it in the owner's closet. But now I'm like, actually like, oh, we found someone. We hit the lottery. So I'm
Here we go.
like, I got to go there and see these people. Cause they're like 7 weeks booked out to do wallpaper. Like wallpaper people are apparently like neurosurgeons. Like they're the most high demand, people in the world. I mean, you guys have the economies of scale. So I guess you guys have your plug, but this is new. So yeah, I have a wallpaper person I'm trying to meet. And then I was talking to a muralist just to like between the two of them just refresh as like high ROI refresh as possible without like just dealing with the walls and then worrying about the furniture later. I guess is that an approach that you recommend for kind of hosts in my situation who
absolutely add pops of color, easiest way to stand out. Everybody else has boring white walls of some sort or even just single tone. Add murals, add wallpaper, easy way to differentiate, easy way to win.
And then do you think timelessness, like is that like some 5 years from now, it's like, damn, wallpaper, people did wallpaper. Damn, we got to redo it again. Like, do you think,
I think if it fits what you're going for the house, if you're blending in a tropical feel, if it's pops of color all the way around, people are going to always want it. Kind of the good news is when you're booking a vacation, you kind of want it to be different than what your house is. And so if people are going with white and minimalist looks, they want that experience. So I don't think that's going to run out. I don't see people doing bold pops of wallpaper in their primary residence. So, if that was the case, then they would look at this and be like, man, we want something different. We want white minimalist. We want plain. I just don't see it. I think more people are putting in the minimalist look in their primary house. So having those bold pops of color is a great escape and a change of pace when they're on their 2-day, 3-day, 4-day vacation.
It's funny as you say that, as I look at my fiance's putting mini duck wallpaper in our bathroom, and she's wallpapering a lot of the apartment. So some people like the wallpaper.
Some are. Not everybody though. So that's the good news.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Taylor, man, it's been an absolute pleasure. Finally, I've seen a lot of your written stuff. So putting a voice to the face or to the Mr. Jones has been an absolute pleasure. And then, yeah, for those, follow you on Twitter, LinkedIn, and then also give Mr. Jones, we're going to hold him. I've been like kind of like trying to a little bit of accountability with folk on LinkedIn posting, just because I think LinkedIn just brings like high level good people. So I'm trying to just be consistent there. But are you going to commit to being consistent with videos and stuff in short form?
I am. I'm actually taking a guide course on how to get better. So I needed to go through my 4 weeks training so I can better understand. And yeah, I can definitely commit to it for 2024.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for joining today, and everybody, stay tuned for the next episode of the Short Term Rental Pros podcast.